Uh-oh. Who is keen to play a patch where Camille isn't the best top laner? I mean, she will still be one of the best, but still, let's get hyped. So in today's video, guys, the Jizz will reveal the 10 best top laners for patch 11.24 with reasons for each of them, with 3 core items for each of them, and the best rune page for each of them. And next patch, there are some kind of significant changes hitting the top lane, so it's essential we try to wrap our heads around these and what they will mean for the top lane meta. Now, so you don't miss any of our daily preseason videos, smash that subscribe button if you haven't already, and let's get into it. Now, starting off this countdown coming in at number 10, it's everyone's favorite top laner. This is Darius. Now, Darius doesn't have the greatest win rate at the moment in patch 11.23, but what's great for Darius next patch is that Conqueror, the stacking is now lasting 5 seconds. So think about it for Darius. With his passive, the bleed, which is lasting 5 seconds, this synergizes really well with a new Conqueror. Ever since Riot nerfed Conqueror's stacking from 6 seconds to 4 seconds, Darius took a serious hit. But with this Conqueror buff, this is really going to push him back into the picture. And for this reason, this is why we're not going to go lethal tempo. I understand that tempo with your W, which is now only on a 5-second cooldown, you can stack it very quickly and it is oppressive for sure. So some matchups you might consider taking tempo as your keystone against champions you know you can actually get on. But for the most part, because Conqueror is 5 seconds, which is the same amount of cooldown as your W, and also your bleed, it's probably just going to be the more consistent keystone, so that's why I'm recommending it. And as far as your build goes, Gore Drinker for the HP, the ability haze, and the sustain with Sterix and Deadmans, you really can't go wrong. This will work in every game, and some games you might want to go Trinity Force as your mythic if you're snowballing, or you might even want to go Strybreaker if you're against a team that might be able to kite you. And speaking of a champion who might get kited around a lot, coming in at number 9, this is Dr. Mundo, who at the moment has the best win rate in the entire game, let alone in the top lane. But the reason Dr. Mundo isn't number 1, he's number 9 on this countdown, is because Frostfire Gauntlet is taking a big hit. Now, I'm still recommending this as your mythic item in your first item rush, but here's the thing, guys, the base damage from the Snowbind passive is down, and the scaling with your max HP, you know, because when you buy Frostfire, you get HP for each legendary item you have. This is actually no longer going to scale with the amount of HP you have. So the damage is down a heck of a lot. Now, how impactful is this going to be? Well, no one can really judge it, but for sure, this is not good. But just the fact that Mundo is performing so well at the moment, the dog will still be one of the scariest top laners. With Grasp of the Undying as your keystone, you have the trading potential and the sustain during the laning phase, and with approach velocity, it can actually be very snowbally and almost oppressive to verse in the laning phase, because this works with your Q slow. So if an enemy champion is trying to escape you, this actually gives you the stickiness you kind of lack, because you can get kited around. This makes up for it. But maybe one champion who can really dumpster Dr. Mundo, Darius, and honestly a lot of melee champions in the top lane, this is Quinn coming in at number 8. And the reason why it gets me going when someone plays Quinn is because she's such an amazing counter. And to be honest, after you play against a Quinn as a melee short range top laner, you are going to perma-banner, because you can never really do anything to her. As long as she saves her Volt for your potential engage, there's nothing you can really do. Now, the rune page you should run on Quinn, very standard stuff. This isn't changing with press the attack. And as far as your items go, I've decided to recommend Gale Force here. I understand that some players might go Shield Bow, but to be honest, Gale Force just gives you an extra bit of mobility, so it's even harder to stay onto you if you're a melee top laner. And then pairing this with Storm Razor, which remember is slowing an enemy champion when you auto attack them, this makes it legit impossible for someone to get away from you, and also makes it really hard for the enemy top laner or even jungler trying to gank you during the mid to late game. And finishing these 3 core items is Lord Dominus Regard, simply because the enemy team is always going to have armor, especially in the top lane, right? They'll probably buy plated steel caps against you, Thormail, etc, etc. So this is just going to allow you to pierce the enemy champion's armor. And also make sure you run Flash and Ignite to dominate the laning phase and snowball out of control. But one top laner who is perhaps a bit more consistent than Quinn, because you do have to know how to space and kite as a ranged champion, this is Urgot coming in at number 7. And what's interesting for Urgot at the moment, not only is he a very strong top laner and he doesn't have that many counters, there's actually a new build developing. Now, remember that Frostfire nerf I talked about for Dr. Mundo? Well, Frostfire is actually the mythic you want to go on Urgot. But here's the thing, we're not going to build this in our first 3 items. So what we're going to do instead is go Hullbreaker into Titanic Hydra into Black Cleaver. Now, the Hullbreaker rush makes you a split pushing machine. We all know this item is designed for that, and that we're going to build Titanic Hydra because really we want it for the cleave passive. This procs on your W, which you are still maxing first, and it just means that for any champion who gets near you, your legs are going to go nuts and you will shotgun them back to base. And then finishing this off with Black Cleaver, which gives you a really nice chunk of HP, which works with Titanic, and also ability haze and movement speed via the passive. This allows you to stick to your opponent much better, so if you land just one Q or E, the enemy top laner is in a world of trouble. And a bit like Quinn as well, we're running Press the Attack as our keystone, which is really good because this keystone has not been touched during the preseason so far. Unlike Tempo, Shadow, which is nerfed for melee top laners this patch, and Conqueror, which has been nerfed, buffed, nerfed, etc. But let's say you want to play a more team-oriented top laner. Well, this is where Shen comes in at number 6 on the countdown. And for Shen, I understand that again, Frostfire is getting nerfed, so if you were going that, it's not going to be as good. But here's the thing, guys. You could just run Sunfire Aegis. This mythic is really good for 3,200 gold. I understand it's 400 gold more expensive than Frostfire and Chemtank, but you're getting some amazing stats. You're getting more armor, more magic resist, and more HP from the mythic passive than you were before 1123. So all of these stats in 1124 are staying, and also the immolate damage when you're fighting an enemy champion, this was up as well, and is staying up next patch. Now when you follow this up with a Thornmail and Titanic Hydra, it gives you the dueling potential, especially in the mid to late game where you might potentially struggle to really go toe-to-toe with the heavy hitters of the top lane. And on top of that, we all know how good Shen is at setting up ganks for his teammates because of his taunt, and also getting around the map because of his Stand United. And speaking of his Stand United, this is why we're running Shield Bash, because this is going to increase the shield in our ultimate and also our passive during the laning phase. So it's a really nice combination. But perhaps a stronger combination is coming in at number 5 on this countdown, and of course I'm talking about Trundle with Lethal Tempo. Now Tempo is getting nerfed, so you're losing 2% attack speed per stack if you're a melee champion, which is not the biggest deal in the world, to be honest, because going from 15% attack speed to 13%, it's not like it's going from 15 to 5%. So to be honest, you will still easily have the attack speed to obliterate your opponents in the early game. What's also nice is that your Q counts as a stack, and it just makes you very hard to deal with. This is also why I want you guys to run Ignite, because Trundle with Ignite, it's a super hard lane to go against, and it's also very snowbally. So with Tempo, if you can get an early kill, you get to Divine Sunderer quicker, and the game is all but over. And because you're all about that 1v1 on Trundle, after Divine Sunderer getting a Hullbreaker, which is going to boost your side laning and split pushing potential, and then with Titanic Hydra, it's a deadly combination, and this is why Trundle has to be on another top lane countdown. But beating him to number 4, you guys are probably so happy that Camille is no longer the number 1 top laner, and the reason for this is because she's getting nerfed. So what's happening is your W's base damage and also the scaling is down. Now this is nice. This means during the laning phase is not going to be as obnoxious, because there's no real counterplay to your W unless you're playing maybe Fiora, who has a dash. But what's also happening for Camille is that her E's cooldown in the late game, this is up 2 seconds. Now to be honest, both of these nerfs aren't the most meaningful. Hitting her passive or her Q's damage, this would have been a lot more significant. So Camille, no doubt with Divine Sunderer is still going to be a force to be reckoned with. You know, it's not like these nerfs will stop Camille's from one-shotting 80 carries anymore. That's still going to be in the game. It just makes her laning phase a little weaker, and maybe her late game 1v1's weaker as well, because she won't be hookshotting like 2 or 3 times. But beating Camille to number 3 on this countdown, this is Kayle. And I mentioned yesterday in the top mid laners countdown that Kayle with the new Lethal Tempo, because for ranged champions, it's giving you an extra 2% attack speed per stack. Now this is going from 5% to 7%. So really that's a 40% increase. This is way more marked than the melee champion nerfs for Lethal Tempo. So what this really means for Kayle, who rushes Nash's Tooth, and you know, attack speed is such an important stat, the fact that you have more of it, even though you're losing a bit of range once you do get to max stacks, like that is just well worth it. This is an unreal trade-off, and this is why Kayle has to come in at number 3. But beating Kayle to number 2 in the top lane, this is perhaps one of the best lane bullies in the entire game at the moment, and this is Jace. And because for Jace next patch nothing is getting nerfed, that's awesome news. Now with First Strike as your keystone, because you're a ranged champion in the top lane, you're pretty much always going to get that first damage off, so it's very, very rare that your First Strike won't actually get procced. But what's interesting in this rune page here is running 2 Adaptive Force, so we're not going attack speed. The Adaptive Force just gives you more damage for your First Strike combinations, so in other words, more gold. So it's worth giving up a bit of attack speed, because to be honest, you're a ranged champion. You should easily be able to control the wave against the melee top laners you go against a lot, so sacrificing that so you just hit harder is well worth it. But the strongest top laner of patch 1124 is Jax, and I understand that Lethal Tempo is getting nerfed for melee champions, but again, it's not the biggest nerf in the world. And just remember about Jax, you have attack speed in your passive, so you might even say that before the Tempo nerf, it was just overkill. Now the fact your W still counts as a Lethal Tempo stack is nice, so the stacking is still going to be there, you're going to get the extra range very quickly still, and there is a reason that Jax in high reloads is banned actually quite a bit. He's a very hard top laner to keep down and actually beat, and even if you do fall behind in the early game as Jax, there's always that threat of coming back because you scale so ridiculously well. Now with Divine Sunder as your mythic item, followed by Blade of the Rune King and Ceres Gage, you can beat pretty much anyone, especially those champions in the top lane who are building HP. Because of the Spellblade passive from Divine Sundra and also Blade of the Rune King's passive, you will shred them. And these days in the top lane, who is not getting HP in their kit? Even with tanks now, Sunfire Aegis giving them more HP, and maybe even some AP bruisers, like Mordekaiser, you might see Akali a bit more. Some of the items they build as well are just giving them more HP too. So this makes Shaxx even scarier to play against, and this is why he is number 1 on the 1124 top laners countdown. So if you did enjoy the video, remember to leave a like down below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and also make sure to check out the GameLeap website in the description and comment section for the best challenger tier videos on the web. We're uploading up to 20 a week for our subscribers that teaches them about champion micro, role macro, everything you need to get to the top and be the best player you can be. We have that content for you, so get that exclusive access. And until tomorrow's daily preseason upload, this has been the